Imagine losing everything you hold dear, your family, your possessions, your very health, and still holding on to your faith. This is not just an ancient story. It's a profound journey of endurance, suffering, and unwavering belief in the face of unimaginable trials. Today, we dive into the story of Job, a man who stood firm against the overwhelming tides of disaster. What would you do if your life was torn apart, piece by piece? How would you react when your faith is tested beyond anything you thought possible? Stay with us as we explore the incredible journey of Job and discover what this ancient account has to teach us about faith, resilience, and hope that transcends circumstances. In the land of Uz lived a man whose name was Job. He wasn't just another wealthy man. He was revered for his righteousness and his deep commitment to God. His life seemed perfect. Job had 7 sons, 3 daughters, and immense wealth. Thousands of sheep, camels, oxen, and servants. His prosperity was unmatched. But more than his material riches, Job was known for his unwavering faith in God. He was a man who feared God and shunned evil. Each day, Job would offer sacrifices on behalf of his children, thinking, perhaps they have sinned and cursed God in their hearts. He didn't leave anything to chance. His devotion extended beyond his own life to the well-being of his family. Job's constant prayers and offerings showed just how deeply he cared for maintaining a righteous standing before God. It's hard to imagine someone with a life so blessed. Job's prosperity, his family, and his faith all seemed perfectly aligned. In the eyes of those around him, Job was the epitome of a blessed life, one that should never face calamity. Yet, as we soon learn, Job's story would take a drastic turn. He would face tests that would not only strip him of his material wealth, but would challenge the very core of his faith. Far away from Job's peaceful existence, something momentous was happening in the heavens. The stage was set for a dramatic confrontation. Satan, the accuser, stood before God and questioned the sincerity of Job's faith. He argued that Job's devotion was conditional, that it was only strong because Job had been blessed with abundance and protection. Does Job fear God for nothing? Satan asked. You have placed a hedge around him and blessed everything he touches. But stretch out your hand and strike all that he has, and he will surely curse you to your face. Satan's accusation was clear. Job's faith was shallow, tied to his prosperity. God, confident in Job's integrity, accepted the challenge. He allowed Satan to test Job, but with one crucial limitation: Satan could not harm Job physically. And so, the test began. In one catastrophic day, Job's entire world was turned upside down. Messengers arrived, each bringing news more devastating than the last. First, Job learned that raiders had stolen his oxen and donkeys, killing the servants who cared for them. Before he could even process this loss, another messenger came bearing more tragic news. Fire had fallen from the sky, burning up his sheep and more of his servants. But the worst was yet to come. A final messenger arrived, telling Job that a powerful wind had struck the house where all of his children had been feasting, killing every one of them. In the blink of an eye, everything Job held dear was gone. His once thriving household was reduced to ruins. His children, his pride and joy, were dead. His wealth, his status, everything he had built, destroyed. Imagine losing everything in a single moment. The weight of such loss is unimaginable. Yet in that moment of utter devastation, Job's response was remarkable. Rather than turning away from God in anger, Job fell to the ground in worship. His words still resonate today. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. It's hard to comprehend such faith. Job, in his deepest sorrow, chose to praise God. His reaction wasn't born out of denial or ignorance of the pain, but out of a deep understanding that everything he had was from God. Even in the face of overwhelming grief, Job's faith remained steadfast. His trust in God, despite everything, was unshaken. But Satan was not satisfied. He returned to God, asserting that Job's faith would crumble if his own body were afflicted. Skin for skin, Satan declared. A man will give all he has for his own life. But now, stretch out your hand and strike his flesh and bones, and he will surely curse you to your face. God, knowing Job's heart, allowed Satan to go further, but with one restriction. Job's life must be spared. Satan wasted no time. He afflicted Job with painful sores from the soles of his feet to the crown of his head. The suffering was unimaginable. Job's once healthy, prosperous life was reduced to one of agonizing pain. Covered in boils, he sat among the ashes, scraping his skin with a broken piece of pottery. The physical pain was unbearable, but the emotional and spiritual weight of his suffering was even greater. His wife, witnessing his agony, could no longer bear to see him suffer. She urged him to give up. Are you still maintaining your integrity? Curse God and die. In her eyes, Job's suffering was too much to endure, and she believed that death would bring relief. But Job, even in the depths of his misery, refused to turn away from God. He rebuked his wife, saying, "Shall we accept good from God and not trouble?" Job's response in this moment is a testament to his faith. Despite losing everything, his children, his wealth, and now his health, Job remained committed to trusting God. His body may have been broken, but his spirit was not. Imagine the level of resilience and devotion it takes to remain faithful when your very body betrays you, when every breath is filled with pain. Job's suffering wasn't just physical, it was emotional, spiritual, and deeply personal. He had every reason to curse God, to give up, but he didn't. Instead, he held on to the belief that, despite the incomprehensible suffering, God was still sovereign. His faith was not dependent on his circumstances, but on his understanding of who God was. The arrival of Job's friends. As Job's suffering deepened, word of his plight spread. 3 of his closest friends, Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar, decided to visit him. They came to console him, to sit with him in his grief. When they arrived, they were so shocked by his appearance that they barely recognized him. Covered in sores, sitting in the dust and ashes, Job was a shadow of the man they once knew. For 7 days, they sat in silence beside him. The weight of his sorrow was too great for words. In the ancient world, sitting in silence was a way of showing deep respect for someone's pain. But when they finally spoke, their words were far from comforting. Instead of offering sympathy, they began to accuse Job of hidden sins. In their minds, Job's suffering could only be explained by wrongdoing. Eliphaz was the first to speak, suggesting that Job must have sinned to deserve such a fate. "Who that was innocent ever perished?" he asked. Bildad and Zophar followed, each echoing the same sentiment. "Your children must have sinned," Bildad suggested, implying that their deaths were deserved. Zophar went even further, accusing Job of being self-righteous and insisting that God was actually being merciful in not punishing him even more. Imagine the depth of Job's despair at this moment. He had lost everything: his wealth, his family, and his health. Now, those he considered his closest friends were accusing him of causing his own suffering. Instead of support, they offered judgment. It's difficult to fathom the isolation Job must have felt. He was grieving in physical agony, and now even his friends had turned against him. But Job knew he was innocent. He knew he hadn't committed any sin that warranted such suffering. So, he defended himself. He lamented his situation, questioning why the righteous suffer and why God allowed such pain. He longed for an audience with God, someone to explain why he was going through such torment. Yet, even in his questioning, Job never cursed God. He was confused, hurt, and desperate for answers. But his faith, though shaken, remained. Job's arguments with his friends serve as a profound exploration of human suffering. They force us to confront the uncomfortable reality that sometimes good people suffer for reasons beyond our understanding. For chapter after chapter, Job and his friends debate the cause of his suffering. Job pleads for an explanation from God, and after what seems like an eternity of silence, God finally responds. But his response is not what Job expected. God speaks to Job out of a whirlwind, a powerful symbol of his majesty and authority. He does not answer Job's questions directly. Instead, he questions Job, revealing the vastness of his wisdom and the limitations of human understanding. Where were you when I laid the foundation of the earth? God asks. Can you bind the chains of the Pleiades? Can you loosen Orion's belt? Through these questions, God reminds Job, and us, of the incomprehensible nature of his creation. He points to the complexity of the universe, the depth of his knowledge, and the smallness of human perspective. Job's suffering, while real and painful, fits into a much larger picture, one that only God can fully comprehend. In the face of God's overwhelming presence, Job is humbled. He realizes that he cannot demand explanations from the Creator of the universe. God's ways are beyond his understanding, and Job acknowledges his own limitations. I spoke of things I did not understand, things too wonderful for me to know, Job says. This moment is a turning point. Job doesn't receive the answers he was looking for, but he gains something more important, an understanding of God's sovereignty and the humility to accept that there are mysteries beyond human comprehension. After Job's encounter with God, something remarkable happens. God, who had allowed Job to be tested, restores his fortunes. But this restoration is not merely a return to what Job had before. God blesses Job with twice as much as he had before. His flocks and herds are doubled, and once again, Job becomes the wealthiest man in the land. But the greatest blessing comes in the form of new life. Job is given 7 more sons and 3 more daughters. His family is restored, and Job is able to enjoy many years of peace and prosperity. But perhaps the most important restoration is spiritual. Job's faith, tested and refined through the furnace of suffering, emerges stronger than ever. He understands that faith is not transactional, that it's not about receiving blessings in exchange for devotion. True faith is about trusting in God's goodness, even when life doesn't make sense. Job's story doesn't end in despair. It ends in hope. His faith has carried him through unimaginable trials, and in the end, he is blessed more than he could have imagined. The story of Job is not just about suffering. It's about the power of faith in the face of adversity. Job's journey teaches us that faith is not dependent on our circumstances. It's not about the blessings we receive or the trials we endure. True faith is about trusting in God's plan, even when we can't see the bigger picture. Job never received an explanation for his suffering, but his story reminds us that sometimes we won't either. Life is filled with challenges that we may never fully understand, but that doesn't mean we're alone. God is with us, even in our darkest moments. The story of Job is not just about suffering, it's about the power of faith in the face of adversity. Job's journey teaches us that faith is not dependent on our circumstances. It's not about the blessings we receive or the trials we endure. True faith is about trusting in God's plan, even when we can't see the bigger picture. Now I ask you, what lessons have you taken from Job's story? How has his faith inspired you to trust God in your own trials? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story touched you, leave a like and don't forget to subscribe for more inspiring stories. May God bless you and give you strength through every trial you face.